Hey everyone, I'm back from the training op, and I have a lot of interesting stories to share with you. I've got enough that I'm going to break them up into two parts, this being the first. I'd love to put them all in one entry, but I just haven't had the chance to write them all down yet. I didn't have anything too crazy happen to me while I was out there, but we did have one incident with a rookie that I found relevant. Since I'm sure you guys have been waiting for these, I'll just get right into the stories. I'll assign each batch of stories to the person who told them to me. So we'll start with KD. KD is a vet. She's been an SAR officer for about 15 years. She specializes in high-elevation mountain rescues and is widely considered one of the best in her field. She was one of the more enthusiastic storytellers, and since we were together a fair amount during exercises, she ended up telling me about 4 that really stuck out to me. The first she told me in response to me asking about her most traumatic calls. She shook her head and told me that really bad calls happen more frequently on the mountain, since the potential for nasty accidents is higher. About 5 years ago, one of the parks she worked at had a string of disappearances. It was a bad year, she said. One of the worst on record as far as weather went. They were getting about a foot of snow every couple of days, and there were a few avalanches that actually killed some of the climbers. They'd warned people that they needed to stay in the mapped areas, but of course, there are always those who don't listen. In one particularly nasty case, an entire family got wiped out because the father decided he knew better than the officials, and he took them into an area that wasn't safe. There was snowshoeing, and best KD could figure, they'd walk onto a shelf of snow that looked solid, but actually wasn't. It gave way, and his family went ass over tea kettle almost 300 feet down the slope. They landed on the rocks at the bottom, and the parents died instantly. One of the kids did as well. But the other 2 survived. One had a broken leg and fractured ribs, and the other was almost unharmed, save for some bruising and a sprained ankle. The uninjured child left his sibling behind and set out to find help. KD said the kid didn't make it more than half a mile before the storm overtook him. He tried to stop and get warm, or maybe just to rest, and he ended up freezing to death. They ended up finding the family with the help of some witnesses who saw them heading out into the wilderness. And she was the one that found the kid who had frozen to death looking for help. She said it had started to snow, just enough to obscure long-distance vision, but not enough to make searching impossible. She saw a figure sitting on the snow up ahead, and she got up to it as quickly as she could. She described in detail how, as she got closer, she realized first that it was a child, and second, they were deceased, and third, that they had frozen in one of the most pitiful positions she had ever seen a corpse in. The kid was sitting upright, with his knees tucked up against his chest. His arms were curled around them and his head was tucked up in his coat. When she moved the coat to look at his face, she saw that he'd been crying. His face was twisted, and the tears were frozen on his cheeks. She said it was painfully obvious that the kid was terrified when he succumbed to hypothermia. And as a mother, it broke her heart. She told me repeatedly that she hopes the father is burning in hell as we speak. The other traumatic story she told me that stood out in my mind was one that happened when she was a rookie. Her team got a report of an experienced climber who hadn't come home the previous day. His wife was convinced that something bad had happened because they'd never failed to come home on time. They went out looking for him and had to climb around what seemed like a very technically challenging part of the mountain. They got to a relatively flat area, and KD started to see blood in the snow. She followed the trail, and as she went, she started seeing bits of tissue. She wasn't exactly sure what body part it had come from, but the farther she followed it, the more there was. She follows this blood and tissue trail to a sheltered area under the cliff face, and she finds the climber. She said there was so much blood, more than she'd ever seen before. He was lying face down, one arm stretched in front of him, as if he died crawling. She looked closer and sees that he's been partially disemboweled, which is where the tissue had been coming from. The guy has a pickaxe tucked in his hip holster, and it's covered in blood. Of course, they'll never be sure exactly what happened, but she said as best as she can figure this is how it went down. The guy had been attempting to climb up to the next area, and had been using his axe to ascend. He'd probably hit a loose patch and fallen. On the way down, or possibly when he landed, he got impaled by his axe, and it disemboweled him. He drug himself along, tearing pieces of himself out as he went. And he had died under the cliff face. She isn't terribly bothered by gore, but I guess a few of the guys who came to help her remove the body threw up when they turned him over, and a good portion of his intestines spilled out. I mentioned to her that I was interested in hearing about any experiences she had with people completely disappearing. Her eyes lit up and she leaned in close, and she said, "You want to hear a real doozy?" She tells me about how when she first started there was a case that got a lot of attention in the media. A family had been out berry picking in the area of the forest very close to the entrance of the park. They had 2 little boys, both under the age of 5, and at some point during the day one of them vanishes. There's an absolutely massive search, and they find absolutely nothing. It's another one of those cases where it's like the kid was never there in the first place. The dogs just sit down and don't pick up on anything, and no trace of the kid is found. The search goes on for about 2 months, but it's eventually called off. Fast forward about 6 months later. The family comes back to place flowers at the memorial that's been set up there for the kid. They bring their other son. While they're placing flowers, they lose sight of the kid for about 3 seconds, and in that span of time, he vanishes into thin air. Now, obviously, the parents are beyond devastated. It's awful enough to lose 1 child, but to lose 2 is beyond imagining. The search is huge, one of the largest in state history. There are about 300 volunteers combing every inch of this park, looking for that kid. But again, there's no trace of him. The search goes on for about a week, with people looking miles from part of the park he vanished from. And then, almost 2 weeks later, a volunteer almost 15 miles from the designated search area radios that he found the kid. They assumed that the kid was dead, but the volunteers said that he was not only alive, but in good shape. Katie and her team go out to recover the kid, and when they get there, she can't believe that this kid had been missing. His clothes are clean, there's no dirt on him anywhere, and he doesn't appear traumatized. The volunteer says he found the kid sitting on a log, playing with a little twig bundle that is bound together with some old rope. Katie asks him where he's been, who he was with for 2 weeks, and the kid tells her that he's been with the Fuzzy Man. Now, Katie firmly believes in Bigfoot, so she got all excited and asked what he means by fuzzy. Was he hairy? And the kid says no, he wasn't hairy, he was a fuzzy man. And he describes a man that's blurry, like when you close your eyes but not all the way closed. He says the man came out of the trees and took the kid with him deep into the woods. The kid says he slept in a hollow tree and the fuzzy man gave him berries to eat. Katie asks if the man was mean, and if he scared the kid, and the kid says, no, he wasn't scary, but I didn't like how he didn't have eyes. Katie says they get the kid back to headquarters, and a cop takes him into town to talk more about what had happened. She's friends with the cop that talked to him, and she said the kid described being kept in this tree by the Fuzzy Man and given berries whenever he was hungry. He was allowed to wander in very specific clearings, but when he tried to go further, the Fuzzy Man would get mad and yell real loud, even though he didn't have a mouth. When the kid got scared at night, the Fuzzy Man would make it go brighter and gave him a twig bundle. He said that the Fuzzy Man was going to keep him, but he had to let him go because the kid wasn't the right kind. He either can't or won't elaborate on that. The cops are just sort of left scratching their heads, and the search for his brother is renewed with no results. The kid has no idea where his brother might be, and they never find him. The last story Katie told me was something that happened to her when she got separated from her training group when she was a rookie. They were learning the basics of high elevation belaying on a well-mapped side of the mountain, and she had to use the bathroom. She went off about 50 yards from the group during a meal break and did her business. I'll tell the rest exactly how she told me. So she said, so I go take a piss, and once I'm done, I start going back to the group. But I've only gotten about 5 feet when I realize I have no clue where I am. And this isn't a, oh, I got turned around, lost. I mean, I had literally, actually no fucking clue where I was. If you had asked me, I don't even think I'd been able to tell you what state I was in. It was sort of how I imagine people with amnesia feel, you know? You're completely lost, you have no idea what to do. So I just stood there for a while, just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on and where I was and what I was supposed to do. But the longer I stand there, the more confused and turned around I get, so I just started walking. As I recall, I just picked a random direction and went for it. So as I'm walking, it's just getting worse and worse to the point where I have no concept of why I'm on the mountain in the first place. I'm just trudging through the snow, and then I start hearing this voice. It's kind of inside my head, almost like like if a frog could talk. It's really low and croaky. And it's telling me over and over, it's okay. It's okay. You just need to find something to eat. Find something to eat and you'll be okay. Just walking and find something to eat. 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 So I start looking for something. Anything that I can eat. And I swear to God, I have never felt hungrier in my entire life. It was bottomless. And I think I'd have eaten just about anything you put in front of me right then. I had no concept of time, so I had no idea how long I had been out there when I hear an actual voice coming towards me. So I go towards it, and I see another of the SARs, and he looks fucking terrified. So he's running towards me, asking if I'm okay, and what the hell I'm doing out there. And the scary thing was, as he's running towards me, I kind of see myself reaching into my belt for my hunting knife. I'm not even really thinking about what I'm doing, but what I am thinking is that I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll never be okay again. So I just have to eat. He sees me doing that and he backs off right away. He yells at me to put my knife away and that he's gonna hurt me if I don't, and it kind of snaps me back. All of a sudden I know exactly where I am, and I put the knife away. I run to him and ask how long I've been gone, thinking that he'll tell me I've been gone for half an hour or so, but he tells me I've been gone for 2 fucking days. I've gone over 2 peaks and ended up almost on the other side of the mountain entirely, and if I had have kept going, I would have ended up wandering into about 300 miles of wilderness. They'd never have found me. He can't believe I'm not dead, and of course, I don't know what the fuck to think. To me, no time has passed at all. I don't say anything. I just go back with him to the rendezvous point, and I'm taken back to HQ and airlifted to the hospital. And when I get there, they do all these kinds of tests to try to figure out what happened. As best they can guess, I had some kind of weird fugue state, which is kind of like amnesia or like a weird seizure that knocked my brain out of whack, but the truth is, we don't really know. It's never happened again, but I'll tell you what, ever since then, I never go out there alone. People rag on me for making them come with me when I have to leave the group, but I just tell them listening to me piss in the snow is better than losing me for 2 fucking days on a freezing mountain. The next person I talked to was EW, a former trainer who now works as an EMT. He still comes to ops like this to help out, but doesn't work full-time with us anymore. He specialized in finding lost kids. He just seems to have a sixth sense when it comes to knowing where they'd gone. He's a legend among the more senior vets, and he gets embarrassed, though, if you complimented him on his work. He sat down with me at dinner one evening, and we ended up swapping stories. Most of them were just casual, but when we got on the subject for our weirder calls, I mentioned that I had a buddy who had gone up a set of stairs. He got kind of quiet and asked me if I've heard of a little boy who disappeared from the park a few years back. I hadn't, so he told me this story. They were out looking for this 11-year-old boy, Joey, who'd gone missing near a river. Of course, the first thought is that he'd fallen in and drowned, but then they brought dogs out, and they led the SAR officers away from the river and up the very densely forested area. When we do searches for people, we search in a grid pattern, and we search every box of the grid, incredibly thorough. When EW's team noticed right away that there were very strange patterns emerging, they figured something was weird. Dogs in alternating boxes had picked up Joey's scent, but they started losing it when they overlapped with another box. If you think a checkerboard, Joey's scent was being picked up in every random black square, but never in the red. This, of course, didn't make any sense, because how could a kid bounce from area to area without leaving a scent in each place he passed? EW and his partner pass into the new box on the grid, and EW notices a set of stairs about 50 yards away. He tells his partner that they need to go check near it, but his partner flat out refuses. He tells him that he's made it a point never to go near any of the stairs he sees, and that while it may be routine, he's not going to pretend it's normal. He tells EW that he'll wait in sight while he checks, and EW says he was irritated, but he felt for the guy. Didn't push him on the subject. So he said, I walked over to the stairs. They were small, kind of like stairs into a basement. I didn't really feel strongly one way or the other about them. The stairs, I mean. So I wasn't scared or anything. I guess I'm like everyone else. I just prefer not to think of them too much. Anyway, I went over and I could see that there was something lying at the bottom step, sort of curled up, and my heart sinks. Because of course you always hope for the best, and we were confident that we'd find this kid alive, because he'd only been missing a few hours, but I knew right away it was him, and that he was dead. He was curled up in a little ball on the step, holding his stomach. It looked like he had been in horrible pain when he died, but I didn't see any blood, except for some on his lips and chin. I radioed in that I'd found him, and we got his body back to command. That poor family. They were devastated. The parents couldn't understand how he'd been dead, because he'd been gone for such a short amount of time. And on top of that, we didn't have any obvious cause of death, which just made it worse. I figured he'd probably eaten something poisonous since he was holding his stomach when I found him, but I didn't want to guess. It's hard enough to hear that your kid's dead, let alone have some stupid agent guy guessing about what happened. They took him away, and I went home and tried not to think about it. I hate finding dead kids, man. I love this job, but it's one of the reasons I left. I've got 2 daughters, and the thought of losing them, it's just... He choked up a little here. I'm not great with emotional stuff like that, and it's sort of awkward to see a grown man cry, so I didn't really know what to do. He pulled himself together eventually, though, and he kept going. We don't always hear back from the coroners about the cause of death. It's not really our job to know, I guess, and sometimes if they think there's foul play involved, they won't tell us because of some legal bullshit. But I've got a friend who works for the sheriff's department, and he'll usually pass along any interesting info I ask. In this case, though, I actually got a call from him about a week later. He asked if I remember the kid, and of course I do. And he says some seriously weird shit is going on. And he tells me, EW man, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but the coroner has no idea what happened to the kid. He's never seen anything like it. My friend goes on to tell me that when the coroner opened up the kid, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He said the kid's organs were like Swiss cheese. Quarter-sized holes were punched clean through just about every single organ this kid had. Aside from his heart and lungs. But his colon, his stomach, his kidneys, and even one of his testicles were full of these clean holes. My friend said that the coroner described it as if someone had taken a hole punch and punched holes out of everything. They were so neat. But the kid didn't have a scratch on him. No entry or exit wounds. The closest anyone had seen was there was one guy who filled himself full of buckshot a year or 2 back while cleaning his rifle. But no one had a clue what could have possibly caused this. My friend asked me if I'd ever heard anything like it, or if I'd had similar cases in the past, but I'd never heard of anything like this, and I told him I wasn't going to be any help to him. As far as I know, the coroner determined the cause of death of something like massive internal bleeding, but no one really knows what happened. I've never been able to forget that kid. I still have nightmares about it sometimes. I don't let my kids go into the woods alone, and when we go together, I never let them out of my sight. I used to love it out here, but that case and a couple others just ruined it for me. So dinner was over, so we started to clean up and go to our cabins. Before we went our separate ways, he put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me really close. He tells me that there are some bad things out there. Things that don't care if we have families or lives or that we can think and feel. He tells me to be careful, and he walks away. I didn't have a chance to talk to him again, but that story, it stuck with me. By pure coincidence, I got to talk to another vet, PB, who's been in the SAR field for years. We were partnered on a grid sweep during a training exercise, and we were chatting casually about how we liked the job, what kinds of things we've seen, and the like. At one point, we passed an old set of stairs, though these were probably an old fire lookout, given the area we were in anyway. I sort of casually mentioned that I was curious about the stairs and that I wished I knew more about them. He got kind of quiet and looked like he wanted to tell me something, but he wasn't sure if he should. Finally, he told me to turn my radio off. Obviously, this was something that we were never supposed to do, but I did it, and he did the same. About 7 years ago, he tells me that he was out on a call with a rookie. They were in an area of the park that's had a lot of strange reports and events, disappearances, stories about lights in the forest, odd noises, things like that. The rookie was totally spooked, kept going on and on about things out in the woods. According to PB, the guy wouldn't stop talking about the Goat Man, just on and on, Goat Man this, Goat Man that. Finally, he told him that there was plenty else to be afraid of out there that was very real, and he better get over this thing about the Goat Man. You see, the rookie wanted to know what kinds of things that he was talking about, and he just told him to shut up and walk. They crested a little ridge there. There was a staircase about 10 yards ahead, and the rookie stopped dead in his tracks and just stands there looking at them. So he said, "You see, I told him, see, that's something you should be afraid of." And the rookie asked me what the hell these things are doing out here, and for some reason, I just open them up and tell him the truth. Or what I've been told is the truth. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble for doing what I did, but then again, I could be getting in a lot of trouble to repeating it to you, but you're a nice kid. I want you to stop looking into this. Just quit while you're ahead, so I'll tell you what I know. Under the condition that you never breathe a word of this stuff to the soups. So I told him I wouldn't say a word, and he double checks that our radios are off. When I first started out, we were a little less tight-lipped about him, and other things that had happened out here too. We had warned people even before they were hired that there was some weird shit going on, and I guess the Forest Service was tired of having such a massive turnover rate, and they wanted people to know what they were getting into. So they started to have people sign these agreements where they wouldn't go to the media about what they were going to see. And the FS didn't want to scare people away, so the last thing they needed were spooked rookies running off to tell the media with stories of ghosts and haunted stairs, but eventually, they found the agreements were necessary. People not only didn't talk about what they saw, they wouldn't. A few times, media tried to talk to people's kids or hikers that would disappear, and no one would say a word. I can't really explain it. I guess we just don't really want to admit something is wrong. See, this is our job after all, and to be out in the woods every single day, we don't need to be spooked. And the best way to avoid that is to pretend like everything's okay. So I'll tell you everything I can think of, and after that I'm done talking about it. For good. And I expect you not to bring it up around me, ever. You see, the stairs, they've been out here as long as the park's existed. We have records going back decades describing them. Sometimes people go up them and nothing happens. Other times, I really don't like talking about this, but sometimes really bad shit happens. I saw one guy get his hand sliced clean off when he got to the top step. Reached out to touch a tree branch, and it happened so fast. 1 second his hand was there, and the next it was gone. Completely clean wound. We didn't even find his hand. And the guy almost died. Another time, a woman touched the stairs and a blood vessel in her brain exploded. Literally exploded like a water balloon. She sort of stumbled down and came over to me, and all she got out was a, "I think there's something wrong with me." And she dropped like a sack of flour. Dead. Right before she hit the ground. I never forget the way the blood leaked into the inside of her eye. Before she died, I watched it turn red. I watched it happen, and there wasn't a single thing I could do to help. We warn people not to go anywhere near him, but there's always at least one idiot who does, and even if nothing happens to him, something bad always happens. Kids go missing, and as we're on their trail, somebody dies the next day, cut in half in a completely safe part of the park. I don't know why, but something bad always happens. I don't know exactly why they're out there, but it doesn't matter. They're here, and if we're smart, we tell our new officers exactly what they're capable of. We were both quiet for a while. I was afraid to talk because I wasn't sure if he was done. He looked like he wanted to say something else, and finally he spoke up again. Have you ever noticed that you can't find the same ones twice? And I nodded, expecting him to continue, but he just stayed quiet, walking alongside me, and eventually he started a story about the biggest deer he'd ever seen in the park. I didn't bring up the subject again, and I didn't press him for any new stories. He dropped out of the op the next day. Apparently he left before the sun came up. He said he was sick. None of us have heard from him since. I'm going to stop here for the time being, though. I'm going to try to post the next part in the coming days, but with all of it being at the end of summer, things are pretty busy around here. So, thanks for the continued interest, guys. You've really awakened this curiosity in me that I didn't even know I had. Talk to you soon.